Hello and welcome to Undivided. I'm Brandi Kruse. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. We got so much good stuff on the show today. I don't even know where to start and what to tease. We have some good news on the crime crisis in some cities that have finally pulled their heads out of their you-know-whats, and they're saying, yeah, we need to do something about what's going on, while other cities and counties are simply doubling down. So we're going to discuss that. State Representative Travis Couture, a friend of the show, he went and toured McNeil Island, which is where the sexually violent predators in our state are held. He's going to have a report for us on what he saw and how it's going to influence his policymaking this coming session in Olympia. Also, the Colorado kid, my new hero, with the Don't Tread on Me patch, he gets to keep his patch. And the Democratic governor of Colorado is on his side, and I'm loving it. Later on, some unbelievable brawls at movie theaters and what it says about the future generation, and Amazon CEO Andy Jassy. I like this guy. He just tells it like it is to those whiny Amazon workers who want to continue to work from home. All of that and more coming up. But first, if you have not become an Undivided subscriber, please do so. Why would you not? $5 a month? I can't think of a better thing to spend $5 on than helping restore sanity to the state of Washington. Lord knows we need it. I want to start the show today, though, with an update on what I think is one of the biggest scandals that we have seen in Washington state, at least in the past 10 years, when it comes to consistent, repeated efforts to hide the impact of Governor Jay Inslee's carbon tax from you. We know that the governor lied for a long time about, saying it's not going to impact prices at the pump. Well, it did, and then he had to change his tune on that. This past legislative session, Democratic lawmakers wanted to force gas and oil companies to hide a line item on the bill when they sell their product to, gas stations, for instance, that said, hey, this increased cost is a result of the carbon tax. And then this week, we brought you the story about the Utilities Commission at the state level telling Puget Sound Energy, on the advice of the Attorney General's office, hey, I know you guys need a rate hike because of the carbon tax, but you can't put that rate hike as a line item on people's bills. We told you the article from the Chronicle. Washington AG's office advised Utilities Commission to conceal carbon tax impact on energy rates. So there's a whole bundle of scandalous elements of this. But I had said that one of the most bothersome parts of it for me was the involvement of the Attorney General's office. You have an attorney in that office who used to work on climate issues in California, and they are supposed to work as public counsel, basically representing our interests in front of the Utilities Commission, the interests of ratepayers. And it was this attorney with the Attorney General's office who said, in my opinion, recommended they leave the line item off the bill, that the Utilities Commission tell Puget Sound Energy to leave the line item off the bill because they couldn't see a good justification for it. So anyway, I'd been railing on the Attorney General's office, and just this, what I really feel like is a pattern and practice in that office run by Bob Ferguson, who wants to be the next governor, of a lack of transparency. And that's bothersome to me, particularly when it comes to your pocketbook. So anyway, we did get finally a response from the Attorney General's office. They had gotten back to Nicole and then basically questioned whether we were seeking information from them in good faith, to which I said, it's not your job to determine whether a member of the media is seeking information in good faith. You're a taxpayer-funded spokesperson. But anyway, so the Attorney General's office sent a long email response to Nicole. I will say it was very clear they weren't too pleased with our coverage of the issue, which is fine. They are entitled to their opinion. And they did want to make a couple points clear. And I'm going to give them an opportunity by reading part of this email to share their side of things. So the email from Brianna Aho, again, the AG's office spokesperson, says, importantly, Puget Sound Energy did not provide a reason for treating the CCA, which is the carbon tax, differently in its filing. The only explanation that we can see for singling out the CCA is political. And I don't know if that means they think Puget Sound Energy had a political motivation, because remember, it was the energy company that wanted to put that line item on bills and was told no. So you're saying putting it on the bill is political, but keeping it off the bill isn't? She went on to say, however, we left open the possibility that more discussion would provide a sound rationale for treating the CCA differently. Here is the entirety of the public comment on this issue submitted by our public counsel unit. So we will read the entirety of their comment. The public counsel said, Public Counsel is also concerned with PSC's proposal to itemize the state carbon reduction charge and state carbon reduction credit on customer bills. In general, program-specific line items on customers' bills should only be used when including the line item is specifically beneficial to customers. PSC does not provide a reason for itemizing in its filing. If all program-specific charges were included as line items, customers' bills would quickly become incomprehensible. We believe the issue of whether to itemize these charges and credits on bills requires more discussion in upcoming workshops to ensure that the itemization would add to a customer's understanding and experience rather than unnecessarily complicate utility bills. So I will give them that they did suggest, hey, if you want to do this, we should talk about it more. However, we know what the UTC decided, based in part on advice from the Public Counsel from the Attorney General's office. They decided that PSC would not be able to put that line item on the bill. Now, whether they're going to discuss that further, whether they're going to reevaluate it, we'll certainly be asking the Utilities Commission. But this whole narrative around, well, it's highly unusual to put a line item on a bill. It's not really true, because simultaneously the Utilities Commission allowed or told PSC that they should add a line item on the bill talking about a carbon credit that some low-income families were going to get, even though the credit wasn't actually a credit on their bill. So it was like the Utilities Commission's like, hey, put the positive stuff on there where we're like, hey, we're giving you a credit. But the negative stuff, we're like, hey, the carbon tax is costing you a 3% increase. Don't put that on there. So to me, it's a matter of opinion. This is what I expressed. Nicole can verify this. This is what I expressed to the Attorney General's office. I said, hey, we can disagree on the belief that the government should err on the side of transparency, but that's what I'm arguing here. And I'm arguing it based on the facts of what happened. It is my opinion that had the Public Counsel with the Attorney General's office said, yeah, let's put that on there and err on the side of transparency for consumers, I think the UTC might have done that. I think the UTC might have considered that. And now instead they're like, we can keep it off. The AG's office says that it would be highly unusual to allow it to be on. So this is about transparency. And I think at every stage, the government should err on the side of transparency, particularly when it comes to issues related to your pocketbook. So we do still have some requests out on this. For instance, we reached out to Puget Sound Energy. We have not heard back from them yet, right? No. And so we're hoping to get some answers, because one of the things the governor's office told us is, PSC, they didn't put it on the bill, but they've informed customers of this increase. I'm a PSC customer. I haven't seen anything. Where'd you put that? Did you? I got my... Hold on, actually, I have my latest PSC bill right here. Let me see if they included a letter in here about the carbon. And I actually just had that there.
I know, I can't believe
this was not intended to be a... Hold on, wait for it. I want to see if there's the latest news on what's powering our neighborhoods. Tells me not to dig into danger. Let me see. Talks about wildfire season, weatherizing this summer. Jeez, where is my bill? I thought you guys informed us about this. Anything about the carbon tax? Anything? I don't see anything. Interesting. Yeah. So I'd like PSC to get back to us on that. Anyway, I think it's a scandal of epic proportions. I think that we allow, based on what I really believe is political bias, if some people are Republicans, they're like, oh yeah, Republicans can get away with, not telling us things. If it's Democrats, like, Democrats can get away with not telling us things, when we should just treat the government as the government, not as two separate political parties, and say, hey, you work for us. Tell us what's going on, especially when it comes to our money. Absurdity. Okay, so I'm going to dive into, and I think we've been really, really hard on the criminal justice system this week, but appropriately so. We have some true breakdowns and some true failures at every level. We've focused a lot lately on the judicial level, what's happening in courtrooms with activist judges. I have a few more stories about that coming up, but before I thought we'd focus on something positive. See, undivided. So in the city of Everett, which is pretty progressive, they are one of the cities that decided once state lawmakers finally put a drug possession law back on the books and made it a gross misdemeanor, Everett, unlike the city of Seattle, is like, okay, yeah, we're going to make sure that we have that in our municipal code so we can enforce it. And they are. And I love to see it. Here's the article from My Everett News. Everett Police Department South Everett Emphasis Patrol books 15 into jail for drug and trespassing violations in a 4-hour period. It says 15 people were booked into the Snohomish County Jail during the 4-hour emphasis on a variety of violations of Everett's municipal code, including loitering for the purposes of drug activity, trespassing in the second degree, outstanding warrants, and SOTA violations, which is stay out of drug area. It said of the 15 people arrested, 9 of the bookings included knowingly using a controlled substance in public. How do you unknowingly use a controlled substance in public? I'm curious about that. It says that is a law back on the books, both under Everett Municipal Code as well as the Washington State Statute, recently having taken effect following a special session of the state legislature this year. So remember we talked about on the show either last week or the week before that new gross misdemeanor law at the state level is now fully in effect. So what does the city of Everett do? They said, hey, police officers, let's go out. Let's do some emphasis. Let's enforce this thing. Let's arrest people. And I will also note, they offered services to individuals. And that's always the best thing is like, hey, you appear to be addicted to drugs. What can we do to help you? As we know, though, in a lot of those attempts at outreach, because they had social workers who came out with police officers, which is also very appropriate for something like this, we have seen time and time again that people are usually so out of their mind that they're not in a position to accept access to services. And so they'll say no. And so what did Everett PD did? Brought them down to the slammer. And look, do I think that these are people who need to spend hard time in prison? Well, I don't know what their outstanding warrants were, maybe in some cases, but for loitering, trespassing, for using drugs in public because you're addicted to drugs? No, I don't think that's hard prison time, but I do believe that having that interruption in that crisis in your life is important. And sometimes it's a forced interruption by you're going in a jail and maybe you're going to detox there. It's probably going to be miserable, but maybe that is the moment of clarity you need to turn your life around. And I say that from experience in terms of speaking to people on the streets. I have said, I should pull up this old story I did. I did this story on this young kid. He'd been reversed with Narcan by police many times in downtown Seattle, had been arrested many times when they were actually making arrests in downtown Seattle. And the last one is what woke him up. The last one is what woke him up, got sober in jail, and then we did this reunion with him and the 2 Seattle police officers who arrested him that last time in Westlake Park, where he comes back with his brand new wife, their child. He's 40 pounds heavier, doesn't look anything like his old booking photos. And it was just this glorious example of what can happen when you give someone a little tough love and they have a moment of clarity to turn their lives around. So can we get a Nicole? Thank you. For the city of Everett, for using common sense and compassion. This is compassionate. It is compassionate to pull people out of the squalor that they're living in. It is compassionate to tell those people, we are not going to let you kill yourselves on our sidewalks. So good for them. I wish more cities would do that. City of Seattle, I'm talking to you, where the problem is undoubtedly the worst. Okay, so I started with a little positive, a little cheer. Now I'm going to get into some negative. City of Seattle. So we have been talking about judges that are setting ridiculously low bail or no bail for people who really ought to have some sort of monetary promise to appear. And again, I love our Constitution. I love that it tells us we're innocent until proven guilty, that it guarantees us due process, that it guarantees us the right to reasonable bail. Love it. But I think that the Constitution did leave some room in that reasonable bail sentiment, that there's some people who, yeah, they have to give you some money if they want to get out. And that makes it more likely that they will come back. So anyway, there was this, you probably heard about this. I don't think we talked about this fire on the show. We had talked about several other homeless campfires that really got out of control. But there was one, my understanding is it started with a candle. So this guy had been, you've probably seen it, if you've gotten off on Mercer from I-5 in Seattle, if you're going I-5 south into the city and then you curve around and get on Mercer, there'd been that camp along the retaining wall there for a long time, and it had just grown and grown and grown. Well, a lot of it is just one guy's camp, a guy named Paris Alcantara. And so anyway, he lit a candle and started the whole place on fire middle of the summer, and there's apartments buildings right there, and so incredibly dangerous. So this is a guy who we would refer to as a frequent flyer. He is cycling in and out of the system every chance he gets, has had something like 60 warrants since 2002, a lot of those since 2018, so he's having some issues. So anyway, he gets arrested for like reckless burning, reckless endangerment, I think were some of the accusations he's facing. Como News was in court, and it played out about how you think a court hearing on something like this would play out in the city of Seattle.
Mr. Alcantara has been without housing for 7 or more years.
Today, Alcantara's attorney asked for him to be released without bail, saying he has 3 options for housing his family, a city homeless outreach program, and a local church. But prosecutors cited Alcantara's extensive criminal history in asking for $10,000 bail.
Since 2002, 60 warrants.
Alcantara's public defender said she wanted our camera removed.
Our major concern is the presence of the news media this morning and the potential impact that making this argument with his presence and the news media's presence could have.
The judge allowed us to record and determined Alcantara could be released with no bail, but is prohibited from going back to the encampment.
Okay, where to start? Let me just start at the beginning. So the defense attorney is arguing he should be able to get out because he has places to go. He has 3 options. He has family he can go live with, he has a church he can go stay at, and he has city shelter he can stay at. After you just said that he's been homeless for 7 years? So after being homeless for 7 years, a big chunk of it spent in that encampment that he was growing along Mercer Street, now you're saying, oh, let him go though. He'll go live somewhere. What stopped him from living there before, or one of the other many times he was arrested? So that seems like just a flat out lie to try to get him out. And then the defense attorney says she doesn't want the media filming, which is ridiculous. But that's a whole nother issue we can talk about. There's something called General Rule 16 when it comes to the courts in Washington state, and it offers the media a presumption of open access unless there's some overwhelming argument to the contrary. And I would say 99.9% of the time, judges always allow the media to film. The only time that we're ever restricted, if the judge knows the rules, is when somebody hasn't even been charged yet, and so they'll say, hey, don't film their face, reasonable, stuff like that. But in this instance, there was no reasonable argument, and you heard the defense attorney say, we're worried about making this argument for bail in front of the news media. Why are you worried? Why are you worried? You can't back up what you're doing? That's ridiculous. You have this situation playing out, and you're basically saying, by wanting the media to leave, that you don't want the public to see what's happening in a courtroom, in a public courtroom. That's insane. And then the judge let him go with no bail. And the judge said, just don't go back to the camp, and then I think the judge was like trying to be very firm. There will be no tolerance if you go back to that camp. But after the fire happened and Seattle went in there and cleared that camp out, guess who was the first one trying to go back to the camp last week? Any guesses? It was Paris Alcantara. He tried to go back right away. So I just don't understand. And again, this isn't someone, clearly he's got some issues, right? I think we can all agree on that. I'd like to see him get help for his issues. But that doesn't mean that you just keep cycling him in and out and in and out of the criminal justice system. 60 warrants. And that's the other thing. 60 warrants since 2002. A warrant means in most cases that they can't find you, that they're looking for you, that you failed to appear. Yet you're going to cut him loose on no bail, and you expect a guy who's had 60 warrants in the last 20 years to show up in court? What is wrong with these people? I laugh so I don't cry. This isn't common sense. This is absolute craziness. In that regard, we talked about on the show the last couple days 2 other instances with judges that just absolutely I cannot make sense of. So there was the car chase that happened in Thurston County, where you had 6 people in a car that was stolen, 5 of them juveniles. The driver was 18 years old. They lead police on a chase. They did a hit and run, bail from the car, wind up in a porta potty. 18-year-old gets arrested, goes in front of the judge, and the judge says, meh, you're good. No bail. Lets him go without any bail. And then more recently, and I think more egregiously, also in Thurston County Superior Court, you had a man accused of and arrested for allegedly raping a daughter. And I don't know if it's his biological daughter. That isn't clear to me. Stepdaughter. From the age of 19 to the age of 14, or 9 to 14. 9 years old to 14, repeatedly. Arrested, charged with rape in the first degree, along with other sexually motivated crimes. Winds up in front of a judge. $10,000 bail. $10,000 bail. And he gets to post $1,000 and he got out right away. So we invited Representative Travis Couture on the show. He represents the Allen area. He's a Republican freshman lawmaker about to go into his second legislative session because he took to Twitter after those instances. He blasted out the names of the judges, and he is incredibly upset about what's going on. So we'll hear from him coming up next. But first, we've been talking about Wes Jones, a wonderful real estate agent in our area. He and his team offer something called the Listing Boost Concierge Service, which is so cool, and it takes so much stress off of home sellers. Susan in Federal Way, she wanted to sell her home she'd been living in for 25 years, but she's like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do to it. I don't have time to do this. And then she heard about Wes Jones, so she gives him a call, and the results she got were fantastic.
I knew I had to paint. I knew I needed to get new flooring. I needed to get new lighting. I told him up front that I was very interested, that I did not have the time or the finances to do what needed to be done. And he immediately jumped in with, well, I do. Work started immediately. And I would say in 2 to 3 weeks, they had landscaping done. They had all the painting done. The new floors were put in. All the lighting was put in. It just was all so fast. And the rest is history. It was on the market for 7 days. I was able to get well over listing price.
To be specific, Susan got 20 offers, sold it for 15% over list price, and ended up getting $200,000 more than an investor offered her before the renovations. Love it. And she told us, I barely had to lift a finger. I hadn't do anything. Wes Jones and his team came in and did it all. And instead of selling to some guy who wanted to flip it for nothing, she got to sell it $200,000 more than she was offered previously. So that's a great story. Sellwithwes.com. Sellwithwes.com. You can start by going to that website, simply using their home value calculator to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. Okay, so we mentioned the 2 egregious cases out of Thurston County this week with judges who I don't know what they should be doing, but I don't think they should be deciding whether violent criminals get out or not, because they've proven incapable of that. So we wanted to have Representative Travis Couture on the show, who's been very vocal about this issue. And also, yesterday he went to tour McNeil Island, which is the island where we put the worst of the worst sex offenders, because there's been a lot of controversies at the state level around what to do with those people, because the state's been shipping them out to communities to live in less secure facilities, like right next to bus stops and stuff. So we thought it was a good opportunity to invite him on to talk not only about what's happening with some of these cases in Thurston County, but also to talk about the tour of McNeil Island he had yesterday. Representative Couture, welcome back to Undivided.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brandi.
Yeah, what the hell is happening in Thurston County Superior Court these days?
Yeah, it seems crazy, but apparently, they don't like bail in Thurston County Superior Court. So, yeah, we have had a couple incidents in Thurston County, touching my district. And one of them was a car chase that ended up with the person being apprehended, and then he was released on no bail. And then another incident where a man was repeatedly raping his daughter for like 5 years, and got charged with first-degree rape and essentially walked out of the court with $1,000 in bail, and is now walking the streets as we speak.
Yeah, and all just for the sake of us not getting sued, allegedly, innocent until proven guilty. But I know that there was a lengthy investigation.
Sure, they're a suspect. Yeah.
Into it before he was ultimately charged. So we've been talking about both of these instances. We have also, as have you. You blasted out the names of the 2 judges involved on social media. Why'd you make the decision to do that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that, I think what most people maybe don't understand, and they should, or they forget about, is that a lot of judges in our state are elected officials. We elect them. And just like people elect me, and I'm held accountable for the votes that I take and the bills that I pass or run, any elected official in this state, whether you be a state representative or a school board member or a judge, or a prosecutor, has to be held accountable for the decisions that they make for the community and their constituents. And so a lot of people they get really confused when they're voting on judges. What is that judge's record? It's not ultimately clear what decisions they've made in the past. And so as we talk about keeping our community safe and promoting public safety, the courts and the judicial system and the legal system has a part to play in keeping our streets safe. It's not just law enforcement. That's just the first step. And so it's important to me that when people make radical, out of touch, tone deaf decisions with dangerous people, putting them back on our streets, that they're held accountable. And if it were me to do it, my name would be used. And so I don't see why. I think it's totally fair to use the names of judges and prosecutors who fail to help us keep our streets safe.
Yeah, I think it's a solid argument when it comes to these are elected officials. And if we treat all people who are on a ballot the same, that there's accountability for their actions. I've sort of hesitated to name judges when they're in the midst of a trial, for instance, because I don't want anybody emailing or harassing them in a way that might derail a trial. But these are first appearance judges in these instances. And so I'll just name them again. Judge Sharonda Amamilo. Do you know how to pronounce that? Am I doing my best job?
I think that's close.
Yeah. And then Judge Allison Zip. Allison Zip was the judge who set the 18-year-old free on no bail. And Sharonda Amamio was the judge who let the accused child rapist go with $10,000 bail. I guess from your perspective as a lawmaker, what can you really do? I mean, how could you, if at all, legislate around bad judges? Because they do have judicial discretion. It's a different branch of our system, and they need to operate independently. Can you think of any ways legislatively that this could be reined in?
Yeah, so legislatively, I mean, we already separate. I mean, if you were to look at state law, you would see a matrix of what is considered violent crime, what is, there's, different tiers of crimes, and how the seriousness of those crimes, right? And, if you're shoplifting or something, I mean, yeah, that's bad, but that's a lot different than first degree rape or going on a 100-mile-an-hour chase and running from police, right? And so there's different levels to crimes. And I, personally, I would like to see that, especially it seems like we have more activist judges in certain parts of our state, not in all. I mean, in certain counties, maybe it's not the same, but at the same time, you could see the hot areas where crime is existing and that this is a huge problem, right? And it's in our urban areas. And I would like to entertain something like a minimum bail requirement, right, for certain violent or dangerous people and crimes, right? Especially, you're supposed to look at like prior offenses and stuff like that, and it doesn't seem like those are really weighing in when you've got people who continue to go through this revolving door of committing crimes and then getting released, committing crimes, getting released, and sometimes judges aren't following the rules that have been established for them. Like a case we talked about a while back in Mason County in my district, where a woman shot her boyfriend and then was released on like $5,000 bail for aggravated assault. And she was obviously mentally ill. Well, when she got released, she went and jumped off the high steel bridge in Shelton and killed herself. So there was no justice for the victim, and there was no punishment for the suspect, right? Or no court. There was no anything. And so everyone loses, right? And in that particular case with Judge Katie Ferguson Brown, there was no competency evaluation ordered. I mean, just blatant violations of the rules. And so it kind of breaks down, Brandi, I think, if I'm being honest, to a worldview. Do we protect victims of crimes and the innocent law-abiding people on our streets and provide them public safety? Are we prioritizing those people, or are we prioritizing and coddling the criminals or the suspects of crimes, right? And what happens is when we coddle those people, there is no deterrence in our law, right? There's no deterrence in our system. So it just emboldens criminals and people who want to commit crimes to do more because they know that there's going to be no punishment.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And no county is untouched by this. You mentioned that briefly, but a lot of these judges we've been talking about lately, they initially got on the bench because they were appointed by Jay Inslee. He's been the governor for 11 years, will be 12 years. A lot of our judges are Inslee appointees. And so, and then they run and they're unopposed. And it's like, okay, well, what do we do about that? I mean, I know this isn't an election-related interview, but I think that you put a Republican in the governor's office to sort of right the ship a little bit. But that is a conversation for another time. We wanted to have you on yesterday, Representative, but you were out on McNeil Island, where our state houses sexually violent predators. What led to that tour that you took yesterday?
Yeah, so it was a legislative tour that, and there was, I would say 15, 20 of us, a rough guess of how many legislators and staff went on the tour. And it was about equally split, Democrat, Republican. And so it was a tour of the entire island, including the Special Commitment Center, which is run by DSHS for the sexually violent predators. And then also the Pierce County SCTF, which is literally just right next to the SEC, because McNeil Island is technically Pierce County. And so we got to tour those things, and it gets complicated, but what really spurned it was my third day in office. Here I am, just trying to get my wheels under me, and I start getting hundreds of emails about SVPs and everything else. And I mean, if you don't live that world, you just really don't know. And so I had to figure out what an SVP even was. And but it's a sexually violent predator. We're talking the worst of the worst. This is not your run-of-the-mill sex offender. These are atrociously violent and honestly very disturbing crimes that these people have committed. And once they're not incarcerated anymore, but when they were getting out of prison, they have an end of sentencing review where a team decides, hey, are you likely to reoffend with these violent sex crimes? And if that answer is yes, then they get that moniker, sexually violent predator, and they can then be civilly committed to McNeil Island or one of the it starts with McNeil Island, but it then can go into something called at least a less restrictive alternative, which is really just a home placement, right? If we're being honest. And there's a complicated web of responsibility when it comes to how these people are released. But what really spurned it on is that DSHS, through a state law a couple of years before I was elected, basically enacted a fair share rule where they are going to start releasing and spreading sexually violent predators throughout all the most of the various counties in Washington state. And of course that landed in my district in Tenino, where they were planning at one point to put 11 sexually violent predators in a 3-bedroom bungalow in a residential area with playgrounds and a summer camp and all sorts of stuff. And honestly, Brandi, as a state representative now, I get a lot of emails and contact with constituents of all stripes, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever they may be. And when I have, dozens and dozens of people who live next to that proposed LRA in Tenino, which, with joint partnership with Thurston County, we got kicked out of my district, and I'm proud of that, because there was dozens of people that said, Representative, I've been sexually assaulted. I was raped. I'm scared. I'm scared that these people are moving in next to me. And these are not even just regular rapists. These are the worst of the worst. And that hit me so hard at home. And I've just been fighting it ever since. And we had 3 bills, me and my seatmate, Representative Dan Griffey, and we didn't get hearings on them, but we created quite a stir. We, with a partnership with Representative Stokesbury, we got some language into the budget, but then the governor vetoed it because it would have provided public notice, which I think is like the bare minimum we should expect. But he vetoed it, saying that it was administratively burdensome. And then honestly, our tribes right now have a huge problem, a big disparity with missing and murdered Indigenous women. Yeah. And up in the Enumclaw area, they already have a sex predator house LRA up there. And so they're very concerned about it as well.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned, I think what were really 2 victories for communities, because one of those houses got put in Enumclaw, really close to a school bus stop. Thankfully, Stephen Knapp, and we haven't updated this on the show yet, so we probably should, the guy who was there who had done some horrendous things to teen girls and was just a predator, he is now, I believe, back on McNeil Island because he had some violations of the conditions of his release, so he's not in that house anymore. And then, as you mentioned, you parents in Tenino, you guys raised enough hell for that house not even to be able to open as one of these less restrictive facilities. So what were you hoping to learn by going out to McNeil Island?
Yeah, my personal view, and I think I share this view with like a vast majority of my constituents, is that we want these sexually violent predators to remain exactly where they are in McNeil Island. And so I'm looking when I'm there to see the state of the Special Commitment Center and the SETF that's there,
SETF?
the Secure Community Transition Facility is essentially a more secure LRA, not like the one they would have put in Tenino, but this one has cameras and 24/7 staff and all sorts of stuff, right? But it's a little bit less restrictive than the Special Commitment Center, which is kind of close to, in my view, to like a juvenile hall, maybe a little bit cushier. Yeah, so I'm looking to see, is this place secure? Do they have beds? And they weren't full. So they have room at the Special Commitment Center and at the SETF. But state law has really kind of hand tied where DSHS, they don't actually necessarily say who can get released. That's the SVP's defense attorney and the courts, right? So if they got a good attorney, they can get released. And sometimes, as we learned yesterday, high acuity sexually violent predators get released and against the better judgment of DSHS because their attorneys and the courts have released them. And DSHS's role is to find, basically create a release plan, an LRA plan. It's like a 90-day plan. Here's where we're going to go. And of course, they got to go into, because of the fair share in the laws, they got to go into the community and establish this housing, right?
Yeah.
But people don't, and people will say NIMBYism for this kind of stuff. But honestly, when you've got people telling you I was raped and sexually assaulted, I'm a survivor of sexual assault. That's not NIMBYism. That's just wanting to feel safe where you live. And that's a huge difference between, I don't want that kind of house next door to me, right? And
Right.
So there's a difference. I really caution people to say public safety is NIMBYism. It's not. You should feel safe where you live, period.
Yeah,
Full
and I would
stop.
challenge any parent to say, oh yeah, put that guy who molested young girls 50 yards from the bus stop where my kid waits for the bus. I'm totally fine with that. I think that's ridiculous until it happens to them, right? It's easy for them to say, oh yeah, let's do it, until it happens to them. I want to end with what you're going to turn all of this experience into in terms of proposed legislation this coming session. But I want to bring something up that I know is never popular when we talk about these types of predators, but I always have a struggle sometimes with McNeil Island and my belief in the Constitution and the fact that, this is the United States. And so can we really civilly commit someone who's already served their prison sentence for the rest of their life to an island without giving them ample opportunity to be able to be folded back into society? So for you, what's the balance there between someone's constitutional rights, which I know you take seriously as well, and, the safety risks that they pose to our community?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said, they finished their incarceration. They're not a prisoner anymore, but they've been deemed civilly committed. They've been civilly committed because they've been deemed that they will reoffend given the chance, right? And to really answer this, you got to go back in history a bit before we had these civil commitments. People were getting released from prison. Everyone knew that they were going to go out and do terrible things. And then there was no law to really civilly commit them or anything like that, or to stop them. So that's exactly what happened. They got out of prison and then did more crimes against people. And so, voters decided we wanted to have McNeil Island as the place where we do civilly commit them. So it's kind of like almost a democratic process, like a will of the people thing. But at the same time, yeah, they do have rights. I mean, they're civilly committed and they have to, so they have most of their rights. I mean, they can still vote, right? But at the same time, that's why there's this less restrictive alternatives, because the multiple times the Supreme Court and all the courts have said these civil commitments are constitutional. But now the question is, how restrictive can you get within that civil commitment and still have it be constitutional? So that's why there's these less restrictive alternatives. But as I pointed out, there is the Secure Community Transition Facility right next door, basically, to the Special Commitment Center on McNeil Island. that is a less restrictive alternative in state law. It has cameras and staff and stuff to be there, but really, as you go through, this is a nicer home than some people in my district have, right? And we can have personal feelings about how we feel about that. But at the end of the day, I think what matters the absolute most to people is that they're located in a place where they can't do damage to us. And so we can still keep them on McNeil Island, respect their civil liberties that they have. I mean, if I were king for a day, I would create more LRAs on McNeil Island like that SETF. I think that was appropriate, a level of security, and also appropriate level of freedom for them being civilly committed, in my eyes. And they're expensive, but and some people will complain about the cost, but you can't really put a price tag on people's safety and their security, right? And so we spent over $100 billion, federal and state money in our state budget. And so really creating another SCTF to house these people and make sure that there's room and a less restrictive alternative away from a society where they can harm people, I think is just a drop in the bucket for our state budget.
Yeah.
And I think we shouldn't put a price tag on that kind of safety.
Yeah, although earlier you used the word cushy to describe your impression of one of those houses on the island. I don't love the word cushy when it comes to where pedophiles are living on the taxpayer dime. However, I digress. So let's end with this, Representative Travis Couture. What is going to be your priority when it comes to crafting bills to address the issues created by all of this?
Yeah. So number one, and I'll be running this again, we need to have public notice. The governor, when I met with him, they were very nervous about public notice. He vetoed some public notice in the law in the budget that we tried to put in. We can't do this, especially, I mean, you got the UTC thing with the AG's office. I mean, we need transparency in government right now, right? People have the right to know what their government is up to. And if you are going to cite an LRA in the community that is going to house, a multitude of violent sex predators, and that's the government's function, not only should we just have as a basic rule that we're going to be accountable and transparent about that process with the community and our constituents, but now it's almost like, hey, we have to hide it or else they're going to find out. And they're going to be mad. Well, they're going to find out anyway, and they're going to be even more mad, just like they tried to do in Tenino. And so I just don't understand that thought process. We have to be transparent. So number one is public notice. We have to have it, and we have to have discussions with people in our community. And the second big thing I'm looking at, which is a lot broader, is basically doing a moratorium on the placement or basically the contracting of new LRAs in our communities, which essentially is just put a pause on what we're doing right now. Because even as DSHS and other stakeholders involved, I think everyone recognizes there's a lot of loopholes here and a lot of issues that need to be worked out. Whether you agree with in-community placement or not, there is a lot of problems to work out. DSHS can't even go into some of their non-contracted LRAs to go see their SVPs at any point in time. The property owners are saying pound sand, right? And that's a huge problem. They need to be 24/7 access to those people. And so basically put a moratorium, a couple years, get everybody in the table and really start working out how this is going to work. And the way I'm trying to do it is doing it in a way in which promotes the public safety and reassures them that they're going to be safe, that they're properly cited, that local governments have a chance to weigh in on the citing, which they really don't right now, and really giving everybody at the table a voice, which is what our government should be about. Everyone should have a voice at the table, especially with super consequential issues like this.
Yeah, and this is common sense stuff, like you said. And I was happy to see, I saw on Twitter, one of your fellow colleagues in Olympia, a Democrat, Maury Levitt, who said, "Hey, good to see you at the tour yesterday. Let's get good work done." And I was like, see, I hope you guys can come together on some of this, because I just fail to see the politics involved in it. It's just like, this is really basic, sane, common sense stuff that we should be doing.
We have to be able to work together on things. And there's obviously some politicians in Olympia that kind of sit on the fringe, right? But you have to be able to work on things with people and find reasonable people to do them with. And, Representative Levitt, we have some disagreements, of course, but she's one of the, I would say, if I'm being honest, one of the more reasonable Democrats in the House. I mean, my seatmate and I and her, we worked together on a fentanyl pill press bill to give cops, the ability to hammer people who manufacture tens of thousands of fentanyl pills. So we're doing more fentanyl legislation with her coming next year and hopefully in the years to come. And then also she's going to be helping me out with hopefully with some of this SVP LRA stuff too. So it's really good to sometimes you set aside some of the the more guttural things and you can work on what makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And we try to do that a lot. And I'll just give her a hat tip. And even though that won't make my party happy, but I'll give her a hat tip and say she's one of the better ones from the other caucus in the House. And I really enjoyed working with her.
Yeah, and we'll reach out to her too and invite her on the show to talk about this issue as well. So Representative Travis Couture, we really appreciate you taking the time and appreciate you caring about these issues. And I know you have so many constituents who are grateful that you've been out there fighting for them on some of these things.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, he's just turned out to be a dang good freshman lawmaker and really responsive to his community, which I think is really the good test of whether someone belongs in public service. So I look forward to seeing what bills he's able to put together on those issues this coming session and what bills he might be able to garner some Democratic support for as well. We mentioned in that interview Maury Levitt, who's a Democratic state representative, and I know Nicole is going to reach out to her to see if she wants to come on the show and talk from her perspective about what she saw on McNeil Island and what she thinks needs to happen with the placement of these formerly civilly committed sex offenders on McNeil Island. All right, coming up next, it's our segment Unbelievable. We're going to talk about teens not knowing what to do with themselves when they're actually out in the real world and out from behind their cell phones. But first, I've been talking about Firstmark insurance because I think it's a fantastic way to not only save money, but really truly understand your insurance needs and what your coverage is all about. Mike and I took the Firstmark challenge back in the spring, and I think that was one of our biggest takeaways is we got like a crash course in insurance, and we were taught, what all of the policies that we have do and what we needed or maybe didn't need. Dave Taylor, he's the CEO of Firstmark. I also always like to say that he's also a Marine, so we extra like him. But he talked to us about the Firstmark challenge and how it really is designed to be a learning experience for those who take it.
We believe and we say that we will help 100% of the people that we work with. Okay. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that 100% of the people we work with are going to become Firstmark clients, but we believe that we will actually help 100% of the people, whether that be stay with your current carrier, but let's modify your coverage a bit so you're better protected, or ultimately, hopefully come over to Firstmark. We're going to put you with a different company and give you better coverage, right? So the challenge is really challenging individuals to give us an opportunity to prove that to them. That's really what the Firstmark challenge is.
Yeah, and you're going to come away with something. Maybe you decide, okay, yes, I want to be a member of the Firstmark family. I might be saving money on insurance. I might get better insurance or both. Or you come away and they tell you, I've heard stories. I just heard a story from one of our subscribers that, they told my mom that her insurance was great. She'd done a great job by herself and she didn't need Firstmark. And so I think that's also part of the learning opportunity and just the honesty that Firstmark Insurance operates with. So firstmarkinsurance.com. firstmarkinsurance.com. They work for you. All right. AMC offered $4 movie night across the country, and it went about as well as you would expect it to go when it comes to today's floundering younger generation. Let's get to it in our segment, Unbelievable. All right, it was National Cinema Day/weekend this past weekend, and as part of that, AMC and maybe some other movie theaters, they offered discounted rates, which is great because movies are dang expensive to go to these days, and you can kind of watch them from the comfort of your own home. So I think that's a good incentive to get people back to the movie theaters, but it also gets people back to having to communicate with other human beings and be around other human beings and not just watch movies from the comfort of their couches. So anyway, we kind of always brace, unfortunately, when National Cinema Day happens because it has brought out brawls across the country. So last year, when AMC offered these $4 movie days, there were brawls that broke out at movie theaters in Georgia, Michigan, Florida. This year, the same thing, but even worse, including in Washington State. The article from the Los Angeles Times. Teen brawls broke out in California and across the country on $4 movie day. It mentioned Tukwila, Washington. It said in Cicero, Illinois, a teen boy was injured in a shooting as hundreds of other teenagers who had been gathered at an AMC left the theater. Fighting broke out near South Center Mall in Tukwila, Washington, the site of another AMC theater, where one juvenile was detained allegedly in possession of a firearm. So in total, from the reports that we've seen, 2 brawls in California, 1 in North Carolina, 2 in Boston, 1 in Illinois, 1 in Georgia, 1 in New York, and then, of course, Tukwila. Like, what in the fresh hell? Movies used to be this great experience. Go to the theater, spend a little too much, but this is a discount. Get your popcorn, get your little treats. I'd always get the, what was your treat? I'd always get the Crunch-A-Bunch.
Oh, popcorn. But
Crunch-A-Bunch.
I don't share a lot of it.
Wow, I ate a lot of sugar when I was a kid. Crunch-A-Bunch, large soda. That's why I was fat as a child, probably. But, and now you have these kids, and this is a regular thing. It's very similar to the environment when you go to, like, Walmart on Black Friday. It's like,
not anymore. I mean, I don't even think that's a thing anymore, but yes.
Oh, it is still. Every year at Walmart,
No.
you lose complete control of your sense of humanity. And this is also, I think, indicative of the unbelievable state of the next generation, where they've just lost their ability to meaningfully connect with other human beings. I think it makes it more likely that they commit acts of violence against other juveniles, which we're seeing this insane rise in crimes, violent crimes perpetrated by juveniles. I really tie it back to these freaking cell phones. How much of it do you blame on this?
Oh, most of it. The cell phones and video games. Because,
way more than guns.
Yeah. Well, yes, more than, I don't blame guns.
Yeah.
I mean, I blame video games for kids picking up guns and thinking they're toys. But yes, the inability to communicate with other humans, I totally blame cell phones. But yeah, I think that video games making, like, fighting is like this natural reaction. On video games, that's the solution, right? You just fight, knock somebody out, whatever, and move on. I think video games and phones are the problem.
You have this opportunity for youth to get out of their homes and up and down their phones and $4 movies. Nope, don't know how to socialize. They're like, I'm going to shoot you.
I mean, you're supposed to just watch a movie. You're not even supposed to talk. You don't even have to talk. But what is it? Like, you're just, bumping into somebody and you don't know how to deal with it. And so you're...
So you talk smack, and then they happen to have a gun, and they're like,
ridiculous.
well, I'm going to shoot you. Mm-hmm. The AMC needs to have, the next $4 movie day needs to be some Jesus movies.
Well, I mean, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, are they seeing Barbie?
Like, what are they?
Are you going to the Barbie movie and then coming out and pulling your gun out?
Oh, and do we have video of one of these
little
fights? This is one of the fights that broke out in California.
Fight cops.
Trying to fight cops. This is a $4. What is going on? And then you got kids filming it. Like, I'm going to do this on camera.
It's nuts.
And it's insane. And I'll say, when I scroll through Facebook and stuff, sometimes these fight videos pop up. I'm like, wait, Facebook, like, hurts me with the algorithm, and I'm talking about politics, and then all of a sudden I see these fight videos of kids popping up. Why aren't those being stifled by the algorithm?
Right.
All insane and truly unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Okay, really quickly, before we get to an update on what happened to the Don't Tread on Me child in Colorado, another awful video of Mitch McConnell. And this just goes to what we've been talking about when it comes to President Biden, just the lack of faculties. And why are we allowing these lawmakers to die in their seats? And I'm not saying Mitch McConnell is about to die, but remember he had the incident where he was at a press conference and he just froze for this insane amount of time. Well, he did it again. Let's play the video.
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026? All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute. Senator. Benny. Anybody else have a question? Please speak up.
No, pull him away. You're going to let him continue to answer questions? He's just had a medical emergency. I don't get it. And somebody, elder abuse is trending on Twitter, X or whatever, because I really think that's what it is all these people in their orbit. Joe Biden's wife, I just don't see allowing that to continue and not saying, hey, honey, this, especially this news of a second term. No, I don't care the political party or what it is. Like, you are not, you don't have the faculty to continue to do your job, and you should be focused on your health and your well-being.
And it's also kind of clear. I mean, it's clear she kind of knows what's going on.
Oh, of course.
Because it's happened before.
Right.
So they've identified the problem and she knows what's happening. So there's some, covering of the issue because of it happening so often.
Right. But that's when you sweep them away.
Take them away and let them rest or whatever. But yeah, honestly, you shouldn't be in that position.
And then she tells the reporters, oh, just say your question louder. That's not the problem,
right,
lady. That's not the issue.
Like, he's being transported into another world for a few
it's very sad to
40
watch.
Seconds there.
It's sad to watch, and it's sad when it happens to Biden as well, and they just keep trotting him out there, and then he wanders away, and it's, what are we doing? That's ridiculous. Okay, update on the 12-year-old in Colorado who went to school with a backpack with a bunch of patches on it, including the Gadsden flag. And he was sat down, him and his parents, by school administrators and told he cannot go back to class with that backpack on. Here's a reminder, here's a little clip.
The reason that they do not want the flag, the reason we do not want the flag displayed, is due to its origins with slavery and slave trade.
It has nothing to do with slavery. That's like the Revolutionary War patch that was displayed when they were fighting the British. Maybe you're thinking of like the Confederate flag.
Okay,
Yeah, so this lady has no idea what the Gadsden flag is. And anyway, what I love, there's a couple updates here. The Democratic governor of Colorado tweeted, Jared Polis, in support of the 12-year-old, which I'm like, Nicole, can we...
another one?
Yep, thank you. Okay, great. Daryl gave us that button for a reason. He'd be very offended if we didn't use it. I love this because it's so true, and I think the media and some of these crazy activists have turned this flag into something it's not because they attributed it to a few wackos who might fly it. Well, no, we're not going to let you take away the meaning of this flag. So Jared Polis said on Twitter, the Gadsden flag is a proud symbol of the American Revolution and an iconic warning to Britain or any other government not to violate the liberties of Americans. It appears on popular American medallions and challenge coins through today, and Ben Franklin also adopted it to symbolize the union of the 13 colonies. It's a great teaching moment for a history lesson. Yes! Yes, Governor Polis. Man, see, I don't just always hate on Democrats. There are some Democrats with common sense. That's what we need. And that's so true. And that's what we said on the show yesterday. This is a teaching moment. And then you got the school who let the kid go back. So the kid ends up going back to school with his Gadsden flag patch. Nobody said anything to him. But then the school put out this statement that, it just is like, what are you talking about? So this is the article from KOAA in Colorado, an NBC affiliate. Colorado Springs 12-year-old did not back down from wearing symbolic "Don't Tread on Me" patch to school. And that headline's great, but then it says, so first of all, they share the statement from the Vanguard School. It says, there has been national media attention on our charter school, the Vanguard School, related to a student having a Gadsden flag on his backpack. Unfortunately, this story is incomplete. The patch in question was part of a half a dozen other patches of semi-automatic weapons. The student has removed the semi-automatic patches. As a school district, we will continue to ensure all students and employees can learn and work in a safe and nurturing environment. The student returned to class without incident after removing the patches of semi-automatic weapons from the backpack. The Vanguard School and Harrison School District 2 worked in collaboration to resolve this matter. So first of all, no, and there was, I did see some video of this kid with a patch that had a gun on it, but that's clearly not what the district representative is talking about. She's talking about the Gadsden patches links to the slave trade. She's not talking about semi-automatic rifle patches. That's clearly the issue at hand when they're discussing it. And I would agree that I don't think a kid should have patches with guns on it going to school. I don't think that's appropriate at all, but that was not what was discussed in that video. So one more thing about that KOAA story that Nicole noticed. When we talk about, okay, why do some people believe that the Gadsden flag is some sort of symbol of right-wing hatred? Well, I think it's because the media has globbed onto it as one. So further down in that KOAA story, they have a picture of the flag with a woman in the background, and it's actually a picture from a protest in Washington State. And the caption on it says, Ryan Oiski yells and bangs on a pot in front of a Gadsden flag while a group of protests before the signing of firearms regulation bills by Washington Governor Jay Inslee. And to me, that symbolizes, like, I don't know, that they're trying to tie that flag to pro-gun people into guns. When I guess you could also interpret it as, hey, they think that they're about to engage in government overreach by whittling away the Second Amendment. Don't tread on me. But we see that often where there's these, like, you know, you've got true right-wing nuts who are flying flags, be it a Confederate flag or the Gadsden flag. You'll often see kind of the right-wing groups fly those flags, but it doesn't have to mean that they get to adopt it and now it's theirs and now the cultural relevance and the historical significance of it is completely gone and rewritten. That's ridiculous. And even Colorado's Democratic governor acknowledges that. Okay, we'll get to your questions and comments from the stream. Coming up next, but first, I've been preaching Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. I read that just heartbreaking, but also very inspiring message we got from a viewer who started her journey after her husband died of a heart attack, just really wanted to prioritize her health. And I think that's what the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan was about for me. Not necessarily losing the 42 pounds I gained during the pandemic, which needed to be done, but also just feeling better, more energy, and before my wedding especially. So eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. If you've been thinking about it, it doesn't hurt to just schedule a free 15-minute consultation because Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team will just go over the program with you. You can ask any questions before you actually commit to it and spend money on it. I think that's a good thing to do, is just see if the program is even right for you. eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Okay, questions, comments from the stream. Vicky Berg with a $10 super chat, but no comment, just throwing money at us. Like, I was going to say, like, I feel like a stripper, but like in a good way. Yeah, throw the money, the virtual money at us. Bill Biz with a $20 super chat. Brandi and Nicole, excellent topics. Great shows this week. I was telling you, I feel like it's been an exceptional week of shows so far.
Yeah.
Good local stories.
I said that I think that you were complaining about stress and, pressure this week earlier on Monday, I guess. And I think I work up better under pressure too.
We work well under pressure.
I think that worked out well for us.
Yeah.
You were extra fiery.
Oh, I love it. Daryl said, I had to body slam an Xfinity agent to make the show happen today. Yeah, we were having an internet crisis, which we've been having all week, which we're resolving this weekend. But it's like the internet will just, the bed in the morning. We'll be like, and then it's fine during showtime. So
don't jinx it.
We're almost towards the end of the show anyway. Erin Lang, who is listening from South Dakota today on our relocation road trip to Florida, which I'm so sad about, but very happy for you, says, with all the nonsense consistently happening, especially with Thurston County Superior Court doing this crap, I'm feeling good about the decision. Yeah, because
Aaron heading right into the hurricane, I believe. So careful.
Yeah, be careful. On Bob Ferguson and the response we got from his office about what's happening with the Utilities Commission, Matthew Cook says, line items have to show that an item is beneficial. I've been told that cap and trade is beneficial as it helps reduce carbon. Yeah, but it's just a really government thing to say, hey, only put line items on a bill that are beneficial to customers. It's a bill. No, nobody expects their bill to be beneficial to them. Nobody expects to open a bill and be like, this is great. So yeah, they want to say, I want to see the itemization of why my bill is so high. Todd Welch says, when I was a city councilman in Lake Stevens, we instituted a fee on certain utilities, and the utilities, not only put it on the bill, but sent a letter. And that's what we were curious about, and that's what we need to follow up with PSC about is, okay, the governor's office is saying that you're free to inform customers and have done so other ways. I'm a customer. Just checked my bill on the last bill. I didn't get anything special in the mail. On State Representative Travis Couture, in his thoughts on the criminal justice system and what's happening with sexually violent predators in our communities, Mugshot Espresso says Travis has been one of the best first-time lawmakers I've seen in my years of paying attention to the legislature since 2017. Travis has gotten more done in a year than some former lawmakers did in multiple terms. He set the bar high. I agree. And I would also say my poll today was, this is on the Gadsden flag. I'll keep that. Hold on a second. Oh, Leland Taylor with a $20 super chat. Here, have some money. It's because I said the stripper comment, isn't it? If you're expecting me to take my clothes off.
Throwing money at you.
We're not doing OnlyFans here. Lieutenant Dan, but thank you. Lieutenant Dan 457 says, raising minimum sentencing for violent crimes is a start in mandatory minimums for certain charges such as gun violence. The thing is that, we have sentencing enhancement for gun crimes. And then look what happened in the Wendy Traynor case, where they cut a deal with this guy and they ditched the firearms enhancement, which would have given him 60 months flat time. And it's like, if you care so much about quote unquote gun violence, why would you not use every tool at your disposal to throw the gun at, or to throw the book or a gun, whatever, at people who commit crimes with guns? Matthew says, something Dory used to talk about was the Washington Bar Association. The majority of the members are defense attorneys, so when they recommend a judge, a lot of times it's a soft on crime judge. I've heard issues about this where they go to qualified judges and they'll rate them as qualified or extremely qualified, even though they're not.
Right.
And they don't have trial experience as a judge, so that is a problem too.
Yep.
On the city of Everett actually going in to arrest people for using drugs out in the open. Can you imagine? Dustin Bellin says, Everett streets have been a lot less busy lately. Now I know why. Let me see here. On the Colorado kid, Kyle says, bought a Gadsden flag this morning. I wonder if my new California neighbors will mind. I'm sure they'll tell you something. And then my poll today was, should the Gadsden flag be allowed to be displayed in schools or on school grounds? 93% said yes, 7% said no. Okay.
What's that 7%?
Well, I can see how you're like, maybe it's a slippery slope. And we've talked about this with HOAs, which is, okay, a lot of HOAs limit flags.
Pride flags.
So if you allow something besides just the American flag, so what else could people argue that you'd have to allow? So I sometimes understand the slippery slope element. You know what I mean? About like, okay, if it's not just the American flag, and then you add this flag or that flag, then people are going to make arguments for what about this flag and that flag.
And the governor of Colorado was making that case that, he agrees this flag should be able to be displayed as well as gay pride and all of these other flags, which I would argue that this is like a uniform country supporting flag as opposed to social issues.
I agree. I don't see any issue with the Gadsden flag. In fact, Miranda will be wearing a special garment tomorrow on Florida Report. Oh, because I was like, oh, hey, don't you have a head? Anyway. Okay, we need to get to Sanity Check because I said we were going to have an on-time show today because Nicole and I have someone we're very excited to go after this. But anyway, I'll talk about it after Sanity Check. Let's get to it. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy is basically like, shut up and deal with it to his Amazon employees who have been complaining and demanding more information about why they have to come back to the office. Apparently, this is according to the Associated Press. There was a recorded digital sort of meeting that happened with employees, and Andy Jassy said, quote, if you can't disagree and commit to returning to work, it's probably not going to work out for you at Amazon, Jassy said, adding it wasn't right for some employees to be in the office 3 days a week while others refused to do so. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is when sanity slaps you in the face and you realize, oh, I am an at-will employee and I can decide to come back to the office or I can decide to find another job. And it sounds like Andy Jassy wants you to find another job. That has been your Sanity Check for today, and that has been today's episode of Undivided. I'm talking fast because, Nicole, where are we going after this?
Oh, a dress fitting.
I'm doing my final wedding dress fitting, and I'm taking Nicole with me because someone needs to know how to put my dress on. And I told her I want that thing so tight that I can't breathe. I can loosen it up later. So I'm very excited because I get to take my dress home today. Woo! Good stuff. All right.
Counting down now.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here. And I agree, it's been a fun week of shows so far. Frustrating, fun, eventful, meaningful. So we'll do our final live show of the week tomorrow at noon. If you have not become an Undivided subscriber already, please do so. Help us continue this mission and this movement to give common sense a comeback. UndividedPod.com. UndividedPod.com.